CFO, they need a controller, they need a marketing person. But if you combine the two companies, you can eliminate some of those positions and create synergies.
Okay, so, yes?
Are there any rules of thumb for fair market value or fair value, I mean, as a function of earnings or something? And have those rules of thumb changed over the past few years? I mean, obviously from 2006 to now, there's been change in investors looking at what kind of returns they believe are potentially reasonable or where they're even willing to look. As far as these metrics, is there anything as a function of certain qualities that gives you a rough sketch?
Let me take a stab at that from an investment banker's perspective instead of a valuation person's perspective, because multiples will get you in trouble. Multiples are just that, and you have to define them. Is that historic cash flow? Is it future cash flow? Is it normalized cash flow? What kind of cash flow is it? And so what we typically tell our clients is there's a range of value from what a financial party would be willing to pay who's just going to be making an investment to a synergistic value, and that's a continuum from low to high. And in terms of multiples, what we try to do is come up with a general valuation, then take whatever the cash flow is, divide it into that valuation and come up with the multiples. If you use industry standards and industry benchmarks, that penalizes the higher performing company, and it actually benefits, if you ever can get there, the lower performing company. So we try not to use those benchmarks any more than we absolutely have to. But when it comes down to the end of the day, you take what the agreed upon cash flow is and the sale price, you get your multiple.
And let me comment on that too from a lawyer's perspective, that there certainly are rules of thumb that people in individual industries think their businesses are worth, and you hear different ones in different businesses. But the problem, as he points out, is the devil's in the details. Oftentimes, and we'll get to the accounting issue on this too, there are various ways of accounting for things. There are different ways, particularly on privately held businesses, that you have to consider, well, are the salaries reasonable? Are there other factors that would affect what your base number from which that multiple is applied, works? So the devil is really in the details on this, and people get really the wrong idea about their valuations of businesses when they rely on rules of thumb. Now, if you're really, really small business, you may not have any choice because you can't necessarily afford to pay the professionals to really come up with detailed information. And the other thing I would say is most buyers, they don't really care what the rule of thumb is. They look at it as how it's going to work for them. They're going to look at what synergies are present in their deal, how can they afford to pay it, how are they financing it. All of those factors are major contributors to how you come up with value from a buyer's standpoint. So let me follow up then with Steve here. I like this idea of synergistic value. I think I can get about 3 times what the guy across the street would get for his business because of the synergies involved. So you decide you're going to pursue it a little more. So if you've evaluated unsolicited inquiry and you want to take it a step further, what are your options at that point, and what are the next steps?
Well, the first step after you decide to move forward is work with your attorney, take control of the process, and get a confidentiality agreement in place. It's very important that both parties know what those boundaries are in terms of confidentiality. Then you're in a position to decide what additional information to provide to be able to give the potential buyer the information they need to make an initial valuation, or provide what I would call a term sheet or a non-binding letter of intent. And I think the less information you have to provide to be able to get to that point gives you the ability to determine fairly quickly whether or not the buyer is serious or not. And we've seen a number of situations, and I've got a quick example here that I'm going to run through. We're working on a project right now where someone that was known to a targeted seller came to them and said, we'd like to buy your company, we're friendly, we want to pay a reasonable price. signed confidentiality agreements, gathered enough information to make some decisions, and told the seller verbally that they would pay X for the business. The seller liked that number, went ahead and provided additional information so that they could get to a written term sheet. When that written term sheet came in, it was X minus 10%. It's not atypical. They were put off, frustrated. Some of that friendly relationship wasn't as strong at that point and thereafter. And they decided that they were not going to move forward from there, truncated the discussions, called us, asked us what we would do. We suggested they get into a controlled auction. There were probably 50 prospective buyers in this particular circumstance. We got a hold of 30 of them, got confidentiality agreements put into place, and we got offers that ranged from X minus 10% to X plus 10%. And that X is the verbal offer. And in this case, it's about a $10 million differential in value. So the challenge you run into with negotiating one-on-one with potential buyers is they tend to love to do that. And if we would represent you on the buy side, we would suggest that that's what you want to do, negotiate with parties that aren't actively on the market. But you have to be very careful because you have to really understand what your business is worth. You have to understand what you want, and you've got to take control of the process and make sure that you don't get yourself in a situation where you spend a lot of time and effort, and then you're disappointed by the valuation that comes in. And then what do? You spend all this time and effort, you're vested, you begin to accept a lesser price and not such great terms, or do you say, I'm going to stop and truncate this process and either go back to what I'm doing and not sell, or do I decide to go to market with multiple parties? And that's, again, where I said earlier on, once you start down the path of evaluating somebody that's interested in your business, you pretty much decided you are interested in selling. And in our minds, if you want to determine what the highest and best value is for your business, you have to have multiple buyers at the table confidentially at the same time. Otherwise, you just never know if you get the best price and terms for your business.
Okay, let me follow through on a few things with you, Dave, relating to the accounting issues. So I presume that you find accounting records are inadequate oftentimes with businesses. What do you do, and then if you're not really trying to sell now, what should you be doing in the whole accounting area to get ready?
Okay. Well, when we're performing due diligence on behalf of a client, it's really up to them what they want to do. And a lot of times they'll pass. And so, especially if it's a financial buyer, because there's someone else that they can find to buy. Sometimes a strategic target, with a strategic target, they'll say, you know what, let's keep going with this, but we need adequate records. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll go across the hall from the cap advisor side and get our auditors to go audit 3 years worth of financial statements so that the buyer really knows what it is that they're getting and they can feel comfortable in making an analysis off of those numbers. Now on the flip side, a lot of times we're sought out to either seek capital for a company or sell a company, which we do through our broker dealer. But sometimes we have to deliver really bad news. We say, look, your company's not really marketable right now. And so often that leads to a consulting engagement. Well, we'll come in, we'll help them with their accounting systems and reporting. We'll help them with their cash management. We'll help them analyze their business metrics and get them up to certain industry standards. And sometimes we actually even come on as part of the management team until we can get the company ready to sell, and then we hire those people out as full-time people. And if you're not looking to sell, you want to get ready anyway. And I think, Bill, you mentioned that right when we first started, and that's very, very appropriate. And because sometimes you'll get that unsolicited offer and it's something you want, and if you're not ready, they may walk away and you may lose the opportunity of a lifetime. But you also need to be prepared. You don't know what the future is going to bring. One of your owners or key people may get sick or die. You don't know what's going to happen. You have to sell your business sooner than later. Well, then you're left scrambling trying to pull all of your records and documents and everything else together, and that can be pretty frustrating. So just have your house in order and be prepared.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to you, Jim, a little bit. So we're still kind of at the evaluation stage, and what can you do in terms of reports to assist the business in evaluating an unsolicited offer to determine whether it's in the range?
Sure. Well, like I mentioned, oftentimes we'll get a call from somebody that wants their business valued. So the first step is, okay, well, what's the purpose of it? And if it's a situation where they do indicate that, well, we've been approached by somebody and we're curious as to what the value of our business is, then from our perspective, there's certain standards that we have to meet as a certified appraiser. And so the type of report that we prepare can be a little bit different if we limit the scope of what we're doing to just that particular purpose, and we're providing our report to that business owner just to get a general indication of value so that that individual can determine whether or not the offer is reasonable. So in that context, we can issue what we term kind of a limited scope report that would only be used by management. And so from our perspective, it involves a lot less work, is less costly to that business owner, and can be limited to just a few different methods that we'll utilize when we're trying to determine what the value is. And then we'll go over that report. It'll be a very brief report. We'll indicate what different methods we utilize, be it an income approach, an asset approach, or a market approach to valuation. So we can limit the scope and present a pretty abbreviated report for those purposes. On the other hand, if they say, okay, well, now I know what the value of my company is, I want to, instead of selling, maybe I want to gift shares to my son or daughter. Well, then you get into a different situation, because when you report to the IRS and you have a valuation report that you need to substantiate with the IRS, then there are more I's that need to be dotted and T's to be crossed when we're preparing our report. So we have to go more in-depth into the industry, into the economy, and spell out a lot more and do a lot more procedures in that case, rather than just kind of a quick snapshot.
Okay. Now, Steve, earlier you were talking about some of the pitfalls of going forward with only one buyer. And what are the potential benefits and risks when taking a company to market generally? And could you provide some examples? I know that this confidentiality agreement from a lawyer's standpoint is a pretty darn important thing. But could you talk about some of the various things that are pluses and minuses as you bring it to market?
Sure. The first suggestion is to put a good team together. We don't recommend, and I don't think most of your advisors, whether it's your accountant or your lawyer, would advise you to try to sell your business on your own. You know, as a buyer of anything, negotiating the purchase of a car, a house, or whatever, the more information you have, the stronger position you're in to negotiate the best possible price. And when you're the seller of a business and you're working with the buyer directly, number one, anything you say is taken as the gospel. You can't make a mistake. A third-party advisor can make a mistake. We can say something that's not quite right and say, well, we made a mistake. But as a business owner, they can hang you with that. Second of all, we really believe that it's important to put your team together. Your legal team, your accounting team, your merger and acquisition advisor, and then sometimes there are other trusted advisors that belong at the table as well. So you're looking at the full picture when you decide to move forward. If you decide to move forward with just one party, as I mentioned earlier, you need to take control of the process, and you need to make sure that you're doing your homework all the way along to make sure you're not investing a lot of time and effort and not get what you deserve or want for your business. And again, using a third party will help you with that. And in most cases, I know we've had prospective clients say, well, I've started to talk with this potential buyer. I'm nervous if I bring an M&A advisor in, that's going to cause problems with the discussions. They're going to decide to back off. And what I would suggest to you is it's just the opposite. The potential buyer is pleased to have an M&A advisor or third-party advisor to become part of the process, because then the seller is vested in the process. They know that the seller